What is the most emotional scene in the Lord of the Rings trilogy? As all fans know, the movies performed so well not just because of epic fight scenes or complex world building, but because of the deep connections we made to the characters along the way. And recently, I was thinking, how would I rank each emotional scene from the movies? And more than that, what would Tolkien have thought of these adapted moments? Were they accurate to his own writing, or were they inventions for the screen? So join me today as we answer those questions by going through every emotional moment in these three movies, ranking them and looking at their corresponding pages to see if they were Tolkien inspired or completely made up. And by the end, I want to hear from you whether you think my rankings are accurate or if you would have ordered them differently. My name is Gibby and welcome to Factor Fantasy, a channel where we discuss Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, analyzing lore and more each and every week. Today we'll be covering 21 scenes from The Lord of the Rings, and of course if you think I missed anything, let me know in the comments. But I tried my best to scour through each film and find what I considered an emotional moment. Just to be clear, there's a very thin margin between all of these scenes. Obviously, I think they're all emotional or else I wouldn't have picked them. So just because I rank something 21st doesn't mean I don't think it's emotional. But anyway, since there are 21, that means we've got no time to waste because there's a lot of film and text to cover. So let's jump right in. Starting with emotional moment number 21, we come to Balin's tomb. Technically, there should be a big asterisk next to this one because if you've watched the Hobbit movies, then you immediately feel more during this scene. But in the original trilogy, you don't feel as much pain when Gimli runs up to the tomb and falls to his knees. It is still an emotional moment, but since you don't really know Balin that well, it doesn't mean as much to the viewer. Now, is this accurate to the book? Kind of. I think Tolkien would have been just fine with this interpretation of the text, as in the book there is a climactic moment in which they find the tomb and Gimli becomes downcast. He doesn't yell or cry out, but he is definitely upset in the book. And one of the key differences we'll see over and over again is the pacing of the book versus the movie. In the movie, things are going a lot faster, whereas in the book it's more drawn out, as Tolkien took many pages to describe this moment. All in all though, I think Tolkien would be fine with this scene. Now moving on to our next scene, number 20 is Faramir's flashback. This is not something that is found anywhere in the book really, but I like to think that it would have happened. After all, the story is told from the perspective of the hobbits, so a lot of these behind the scenes stuff Tolkien wouldn't have talked about. Now, whether Tolkien would approve of it or not is hard to tell, as Faramir and Boromir's entire backstory is so warped in the films that it probably would have tainted Tolkien's opinion. But as for this specific memory in which Boromir wishes his younger brother farewell for the last time, I always feel a pang of emotion. However, not nearly enough to rank it any higher than 20th. At number 19, we have Gandalf and Pippin's brief conversation in Minas Tirith, just moments before orcs and trolls break down the door to another level of the city. This is such a beautiful moment of the movie, and one that touches my heart as Gandalf comforts Pippin. What makes it such an incredible moment is that Gandalf doesn't comfort Pippin by saying that they'll survive. In fact, he kind of says the opposite by going into a description of what heaven is like, or rather, what after death is like. It's not a patronizing, "you'll be okay, kid," response to Pippin's fear, but a paternal wisdom that says death is just another door, so don't fear it. Is this moment book accurate? Not in the slightest. Part of Gandalf's lines are pulled from Frodo's time with Tom Bombadil in the book, and on top of that, the enemy never gets inside Minas Tirith in the book. Again, I'm not sure if Tolkien would approve of the plot changes made to get Gandalf and Pippin to this predicament, but as for the sentiment of the conversation, I think Tolkien would have loved it. Next up, our emotional moment ranked at number 18 is Aragorn's fall. This consists of his fall, Gimli and Legolas's reactions, Éowyn learning about it, and Aragorn's arrival back at Helm's Deep. I know that's a lot of moments put together, but it would be kind of pointless to split it all up. The reason this isn't higher up on the list is because frankly you can kind of figure out that Aragorn wasn't going to die. So as a viewer, you weren't really upset by it. But what makes this sequence of scenes higher than the previous moments I mentioned is not so much Aragorn falling as it is his friends' reactions to it. Gimli informing Éowyn of the news and her looking at Theoden, who just avoids eye contact and walks by, is such a great moment, especially when you get the later payoff of Aragorn coming back and Gimli greeting him. Does this happen in the book? Nope, not at all. And I don't think Tolkien would have appreciated it, because Aragorn isn't the type of character you fake kill off. Tolkien really only did that once with Gandalf, and he had a good lore reasoning behind why Gandalf returned. But anyway, let's move on to emotional scene number 17, which is Éowyn's big reveal in Theoden's last moments. This is essentially the climax of two separate character arcs. Between the both of them, it creates a great emotional payoff in which we are cheering for Éowyn and then weeping for Theoden. The reason this is 17 is because in the movie, we know who Éowyn is. We know that she's faking being a man to get into battle. In the book, you don't have that knowledge. Although you can make assumptions, Tolkien doesn't reveal Éowyn's identity until her big reveal with the Witch King. This is one of those moments where the book actually has a better emotional payoff, but I can't blame the movie for that. Tolkien had the benefit of no visuals. In the movie, how exactly were they supposed to make you think that Durnhelm was anyone other than Éowyn? It would be way too obvious. As for Theoden's part, this is another moment I actually prefer the book version for. In the book, Éowyn passes out after killing the Witch King, and Merry is the one who spends time with Theoden in his last moments. Theoden also has enough time to tell some of his men that Éomer is king now. But all in all, I think the movie did a great job. It just wouldn't have lived up to Tolkien's expectations for that moment. Now moving on to number 16, we have perhaps a controversial one, and that is Sam chasing after Frodo as he tries to sneak off. This one is fairly accurate to the book, so I think Tolkien would have appreciated the movie representation of this heartfelt moment in which Sam shows his loyalty. It's a great positive emotional climax to counter the negative emotion from Boromir's death at the end of the first film, and of course I'm a sucker for any Sam scenes, so I had to include it. But given the fact that it's only in the first film and we haven't had much of a build-up at that point, it's only number 16 in my rankings. But we'll be talking about some more Sam scenes in a bit. Or rather, I guess we'll talk about another one right now because our scene at number 15 is Sam's speech in Osgiliath. Despite the setting being completely inaccurate to the book, the speech itself is pieced together from future dialogue, so I think Tolkien would have appreciated it at least a little bit. I know I do. It's the perfect amount of hope and light in such a dark part of the movies. And speaking of light, that brings me to the scene I ranked 14th, and that is Aragorn and Theoden's charge from Helm's Deep and Gandalf's arrival with Éomer. Technically, in the book, the only thing wrong with this moment is that Éomer was in Helm's Deep already, and it's Erkenbrand who arrives with Gandalf. But that's not really an important point. For the most part, Peter Jackson and company crushed this scene. It's such a beautiful moment when you feel like Theoden has given up and Aragorn steps up showing his quality by rousing the men and the king to take one final stand, which will surely result in their death. It is so perfect and I get goosebumps every time. It's a very different type of emotion. While a lot of these scenes we're talking about today are sad, there are quite a few like this one that are just epic, and goosebumps are the only proper response. But now that we've touched on a couple of lighthearted moments, we need to come back down to reality and deal with the harsh scene, and that is Denethor sending Faramir to his death. This ranks at number 13 in my book, and it's really tough to watch, as Faramir so desperately wants the approval of his father, but Denethor, in his grief, is too blind to give it. These lines just crush me every time. If you ignore Denethor's insane eating habits and just listen to Pippin singing as Faramir charges into Osgiliath, it'll make you emotional for sure. Is it book accurate? Somewhat. There are a lot of intricacies to this in the book that I can't cover today because it would take way too long, so now's a perfect time to plug my series Movies vs. Manuscripts, which you can binge watch today using the playlist linked in the description. I cover every scene and page of the books and movies and go over all the tiny details that I can't address today. So if you're interested in critical analysis like that, you can check that out after this video. But anyway, let's keep things moving and head into number 12, which is the Fellowship being reunited. This is when Frodo wakes up at the end of The Return of the King, and each member of the Fellowship walks in to greet him. Frodo forgets Legolas's name, and then the last person to enter is Sam. This moment of watching Sam and Frodo make eye contact and not saying anything is such a perfect representation of what we just witnessed them go through leading up to this scene. It's that connection of two people who have just been through war together, and words can't express nor are needed to express how they feel. They just understand. Would Tolkien have liked this? Probably not. Not because it isn't good, but because his original version in the book is completely different, and it's hard for me to compare the two because they are so different, but I would have liked to see Tolkien's version on screen. Maybe it would have been better. I guess we'll never know. And speaking of Frodo's journey, I wonder if he had any benefactors on his epic quest. I mean, I guess Elrond and the elves could count. They did house them for weeks and give them supplies in Rivendell. Well, anyway, just like Frodo needed the assistance of the elves during his quest to destroy the One Ring, I am seeking help in my quest to talk about Tolkien for the next 10 years. I know my quest is not nearly as epic, but if you're enjoying the content and want to support, becoming a channel member is a great way to do that. I opened up a Patreon a few months ago, but to simplify things, I recently created channel memberships right here on YouTube. So in just a couple of clicks, you can start supporting the channel and earning some cool perks like early access to videos, behind-the-scenes content, and input on what I make in the future. To be absolutely clear, viewing, liking, and sharing with a friend are all incredible ways to support, and I absolutely love when each and every one of you do that. So don't stress it if you don't want to become a channel member. This is just an opportunity for the kings and queens under the mountain who have a couple of gold coins laying around and want to support a hobbit on a journey. And on that note, thank you to the legends Jason, Joshua, Timothy, Robo Steve, and everyone else listed here who already supports on Patreon. You guys are the best. Now with that being said, let's dive into the second half of this video by taking a look at emotional moment number 11. Theoden realizing that Theodred is dead. This one is a sleeper because you wouldn't think that we'd be that invested in a character that we haven't really met, Theodred, and a character we only just met, Theoden. But that moment when Theoden turns around and says, "Where is Theodred?" it just hits me hard. Then you follow it up with him after the funeral crying on his knees while Gandalf stands there. It's just one of the most beautifully sad moments in the trilogy. And although we don't get any of that in the book, I think Tolkien would have enjoyed watching his character be portrayed in this way by Bernard Hill. Kinda crazy to think it's only number 11, but that just goes to show how emotional these next few are gonna be. And speaking of which, let's enter the top 10 by covering emotional moment number 10, which is Frodo sending Sam away. Right off the rip, let me just say that this never happened in the book, and Tolkien would have hated this being in the movie. But now that we've gotten that out of the way, this is a very emotional scene for me. It's the representation of someone letting the dark side get the better of them to the point where they can't even see the love that their friend has for them. Frodo is coerced and manipulated by his own addiction to the ring, and he sends Sam away, his most loyal and dearest friend. Seeing Sam cry just makes me want to cry every time. But this moment isn't even close to some future Sam moments that we're about to have. One of which is our 9th emotional scene, and that is when Sam believes Frodo is dead. This happens right after Sam scares off Shelob, which is a victorious feeling in itself, but then we come down from that high real quick as Sam goes to his master and presumes him dead. This is another moment in the book which is better, as Tolkien did write about this, and it is much more detailed. So much so that we learn in the book that Sam nearly cast himself off the cliff in despair. He essentially goes through multiple stages of grief in only a few minutes and then determines that he must carry on the mission himself. Despite not getting those details in the movie, we still feel a lot during this scene, especially after watching the scene that I just covered as number 10. After seeing Sam being sent away, it's a big payoff to have him come back and save the day, only to find his master dead. But now let's move away from Sam and Frodo and actually move away from the second and third movies entirely as we jump back to the first movie for our 8th most emotional scene. Can you guess? That's right, Boromir's final stand. This is such a great climax for the first film, and I think Peter Jackson did the right thing to move it up in the sequence. You see, technically, Boromir dies at the beginning of the second book, but it works better on film for it to happen at the end of the first movie. There are some minor changes to this moment between the book and film, but I think Tolkien would have approved. All in all, we get all the right emotions here. We feel Boromir is redeemed, we see Aragorn's mercy and grace as he says goodbye, and ultimately this moment is a catalyst that changes Merry and Pippin, affecting the rest of the story. Everyone's a sucker for a good comeback story, and despite Boromir's flaws, seeing him jump in front of the halflings is just on another level of emotion for me, so that's why it's in the top 10 at number 8. So what do you think comes next? I'm sure there are a few moments that come to mind that I haven't mentioned yet, and perhaps you're thinking of our 7th most emotional scene, which is the Ride of the Rohirrim. This is one of the best moments in the entire trilogy, known by Lord of the Rings fans around the world. I absolutely love this scene for multiple reasons, but probably the largest reason is just how epic it feels. This is a weird one because it's so epic that I almost tear up every time I watch it. It's like goosebumps and tears all at the same time. Now technically, Theoden's speech, which is sort of the linchpin of this emotional moment, is not his in the book. Éomer actually screams death and says some of the other stuff after seeing Theoden dead on the battlefield. But I am so happy that they rewrote this and gave it to Theoden. It's such a redemptive moment for the king, and amidst the darkness, it provides a little bit of hope as you see the orc armies get crushed under the hooves of the Rohirrim. While this battle is changed quite significantly, I still think Tolkien would have liked it. For the most part, the Rohirrim's charge is the same as the book, and I can't imagine being an author and seeing a moment like that come together visually on such a grand scale. I'm sure watching thousands of horses charge into the armies of Mordor would have been surreal for Tolkien to see. But now let's move forward and talk about our sixth most emotional scene, and that is the end of all things. No, not the end of this video, I mean the scene, the end of all things. This is when Sam and Frodo sit on a rock on the side of Mount Doom as lava flows around them. They have completed their task, and Frodo is finally feeling the relief of no longer having the ring control him. But this is a bittersweet moment, and that's what makes it so emotional. Despite having won the day, they lay there knowing that they're going to die. And I get emotional every time they reflect on their journey, and Sam talks about the life that he could have had with Rosie Cotton. And then what makes me even more emotional is when they get close, hold each other, and say that at the end of all things, they're glad to be with each other. While many might look at this as weird or romantic, true fans know that this is a depiction of Tolkien's time in war. This is the camaraderie and relationship that you have with your fellow soldiers in the trenches as the opposition charges toward you and you have no retreat. It's the feeling that not only Tolkien perfectly communicated in the book, but a feeling that Sean Astin, Elijah Wood, and the writers nailed on film. Next up, at our fifth most emotional scene, we have Gandalf's fall. Now, to be honest, we all knew that he'd be coming back, but Gandalf is such a central part of the first film that it's hard to not feel anything when you watch him fall into the darkness. But the real nail in the coffin here is the response by the Fellowship. The hobbits crying, Legolas in shock, and Aragorn trying to gather them and take up the mantle of leadership amidst grief. It's all such an incredible moment on film. It is not 100% book accurate, but I think Tolkien would have approved. Now we're in the final four scenes, which means I might start crying at any moment, but I'll try to hold it together. At number 4, we've got the Grey Havens. I know, this might be a bit surprising, as some of you might rank this lower than a scene like the one we just discussed, but there's just something about the finality of this scene that gets to me. It's the idea that Frodo is going away and Sam will never see him again. Now, I know technically Sam did see him again, as he went to the Undying Lands in his old age, but in the film, we don't know that. And we witness 4 friends who went to hell and back together say goodbye for the last time. While the book shares a slightly different version of this story, I think Tolkien would have understood the time constraints of the film and been okay with Peter Jackson's version. I prefer the book over the movie scene, although I love both. In the book though, you just get way more details and a longer goodbye between Frodo and Sam as they journey to the Grey Havens together. But obviously, despite liking the book more, I still really love this scene as I've ranked it at number 4. Now before I get into my top 3, I just want to clarify that even as I'm writing the script out, I've been changing my mind on things. These top 5 scenes, and especially the top 3, are so close together that they kind of flip-flop places depending on my mood. And I'm sure you're probably the same way. But as of right now, here are my top 3. At number 3, I put For Frodo, which to me includes the battle and the moments after Sauron's destruction as well. So really just the whole Battle of the Morannon sequence. But of course, the best part of all of those scenes is Aragorn's For Frodo. I know this might be a bit controversial, as I've heard people say that they don't like that scene, but it is peak cinema to me. After everything we've been through on this journey, we're witnessing once again the spirit of people willing to lay down their life for what is good. Despite thinking that Frodo is dead and all hope is lost, they refuse to surrender and decide to fight for what's right in honor of their friend. By the way, I get Sam was also lost, but saying For Frodo and Sam wouldn't have had the same effect. Now, would Tolkien have liked this scene? It's hard to tell. His final battle wasn't very similar to the movie version, but I think he would have appreciated the For Frodo line, but he wouldn't have liked all the details they changed surrounding this event. Also, besides Aragorn saying For Frodo, I just love everyone's reaction to Mount Doom erupting. It's this complete 180 as they charge into battle thinking hope is lost, and then they see Sauron get destroyed so they know Frodo is alive and succeeded, and then they flip back to sadness as they realize Frodo couldn't have survived that mountain's explosion. It's just a whirlwind of emotions, and each actor does an incredible job portraying this devastation, even amidst the victory. But anyway, I gotta force myself to move on because we still have our final two moments. The second most emotional moment of the entire trilogy for me is the line, "You bow to no one." This is such a brief moment at the end of the movies, but it encapsulates so perfectly the essence of the entire trilogy. If you've read the books, you know that Tolkien spent multiple chapters wrapping up the series. He tied up the loose ends, ended each character's story, and then sent Frodo off to the Undying Lands. But since there wasn't time to do all of the in-between stuff in the film, this final line from Aragorn and Minas Tirith is the perfect way to wrap things up. It just exemplifies exactly how I feel toward the hobbits by the end of the story. Needless to say, this is nothing like the book, and Tolkien probably wouldn't have enjoyed this, because the last chapters are some of his best writing, and they got cut. But as a viewer, I think we all tear up a little during this heartfelt moment. But finally, we've now come to what I consider the most emotional scene in the entire trilogy. And you can probably guess it because you've been thinking about it this whole time. The most emotional scene, in my opinion, is Sam carrying Frodo up Mount Doom. Man, I can't even begin to describe how this makes me feel. The first time I watched it, it made me emotional, and the 100th time I felt the same way. In my opinion, and in Tolkien's as well, Sam is the main character, and this sort of is his climactic moment. The moment in which he takes charge and helps Frodo finish the journey. Now in the book, this does happen, albeit a little differently. But all in all, I think Tolkien would have appreciated this portrayal by Sean and Elijah on the slopes of Mount Doom. But anyway, that's enough of my yapping. What do you think about each of these emotional scenes from the trilogy? And more importantly, how would you rank them? Drop a comment below and let me know how I did and if you'd make any changes. If you enjoyed, be sure to like and subscribe and check out my other videos for more Tolkien-related content like this. As always, thanks for the support, have a great week, and I'll see you in the next video.